It was related to a drug deal gone bad. It was, I had known Gary Hinman for several years. In fact, well, everybody did. Everybody who lived around the Topanga Canyon area knew everybody else. Charlie knew Gary. I knew Gary. Gary knew, everybody that was in and around that area at that time. It was, like a little community. And, to have, it's hard for me to say what was going on in Charlie's mind or what was going on in the minds of his followers, because what occurred in my situation was much different. And I had no foreknowledge of what was going on. The living rooms of America, the horrors that were taking place overseas in Vietnam. You could look at it in that way. Here's something that we took over as a country, took to another country, and committed some horrendous, atrocious, murderous acts on other people in an undeclared war. Now, it got brought home through Charlie Manson. There's one way of looking at it. But, really, I have to, personally, in looking at it, I have to say that it was a tragedy. It was a tragedy to the people who died and to the people who got caught up in these events with Charlie, because I think that in the long run, they really didn't know what they were doing. They trusted this individual, and in the long run, here he is. He's still, after 25 years, continues with the same rap, he hasn't changed his rhetoric much at all that I've seen, and it hasn't evolved. He's just sort of stuck in the same place, and he still does not accept responsibility for the influence that he had on those people.
Right.
I think that's ultimately a betrayal. I can understand, I was watching that show, Turning Point.
Yeah.
And I thought it was very well done. And I listened to Leslie and Patricia, and I knew Leslie a little bit better than I knew any of the other girls. She's just, here's a girl that really didn't kill anybody, and she's in here for, because they forced her to stab somebody after he or she was dead, so that she would be complicit in what was going on. And here's this guy who told her to go along on this thing, who won't even accept responsibility. It's really...
I remember Dennis Wilson told me he knew Gary Hinman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was a keyboard player or something, wasn't he?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah, he was a piano player.
Yeah.
Very kind of he was not, a performing musician at all. He was a very kind of reclusive guy, quiet. He was teaching piano and doing a little part-time drug dealing out of his Topanga Canyon house.
Yeah.
I'd known him for, like I said, he was one of the first people I knew in Topanga Canyon. I had rented a place up on Horseshoe Drive, and it needed work, so I stayed at Gary Hinman's. He had a little studio apartment down below his house, and I stayed there for a month or so while I was working on this other house.
Mm-hmm.
So, I knew Gary, and, we sit at his little baby grand piano and fool around, play. He used to show me how to write down, I wanted to learn how to write down my compositions. He used to be able to, put notes on the staff. But I never really had any, training in theory and writing and reading, which in certain ways helped me, musically, because, it allowed me to define my own style without being locked in at an early age to somebody else's way of doing music.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, I've had an opportunity to learn more about theory and reading and writing music, which, does help me to convey musical ideas to other people.
I'm going to fast forward really a huge leap now because obviously
I'm jumping around anyway, so I guess.
Tell us about your instrumental invention.
Uh-huh.
It's a guitar synthesizer, right?
Yeah, it's not really a guitar synthesizer because it's not a guitar. I call it the Syntar, which is just my own. For a while I called it the Dream Machine, and that didn't really state what it was too well, so I eventually came up with the name Syntar, which I think defines it comes somewhat close to defining it in just a few syllables. What it is a touch-controlled controller. It doesn't use strings in the sense that a guitar uses strings. There are strings that are, it does have a neck and it has a body like a guitar or a stringed instrument, and it does have some strings in the design. The design calls for strings that that follow the neck like a guitar or a cello or a violin or any stringed instrument, but their purpose is mainly as to act as guides for the fingers, not really to to determine the pitch of the instrument. What determines the pitch is a touch sensor that lays beneath the strings that determines the distance between an imaginary, what is called the bar. In this case, it's an imaginary bridge because it doesn't, again, we're not generating pitch mechanically. We're generating it electronically. So anyway, what happens is that you play the neck just like you would on a stringed instrument, and the higher up you play on the neck, the higher the pitch. And it's very accurate. It's converted from an analog signal into digital, into high resolution digital signal, which can be transmitted over MIDI, over the musical instrument digital interface standard. And then that's one of the two main controllers. You have several of these string controllers on a neck played by the left hand, and then on the right hand you have touch-sensitive, pressure-sensitive sensors for each of those string controllers. And those controllers, working in tandem with the high-resolution pitch controller. There we go. I'm going to have to call you back on this.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Hi.
It sure would be nice to be able to shorten that little thing. Spiel.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're telling us about your instrument.
Right. I was talking about the right-hand controllers. Now, I defined that there are left-hand controllers. There are a number of strings, and it can be, the design could be adapted for a 4-stringed instrument or a 6-stringed instrument or whatever. It's just a matter of adding additional controllers in parallel. You make the neck as wide or as narrow as you want. Essentially, though, what you have is you have these digital string controllers that are continuous. In other words, if you know anything about a synthesizer, you know that there is a controller on the synthesizer adjacent to the keyboard called the bender. Mm-hmm. And this is like a large wheel that you use to bend the pitch up or down by an increment that you program the synthesizer. You program that particular parameter to, say, an octave or to a whole step or whatever, and you use this wheel to bend the pitch. Well, if you're using the Centaur as a controller, the string controller takes the place of that bender, of that bending wheel, and it stretches it out, about 18 inches or so, giving a very high resolution, a very very supple control of pitch. The bender in MIDI, the digital interface for music, the pitch bend has a specification of 14 bits, and usually that's spread over a maximum range of 2 octaves. So which is about the range of a guitar string. A single guitar string played from the open position to its highest fret position is at almost 2 octaves, or in some cases 2 octaves. And so if you were to take this interpret it electronically and take the bender parameter of the MIDI standard, stretch it out on a controller that's about 18 inches long, and specify that the synthesizer will be set to a 2 octave range, then you would be able to play this controller where like a violin string or a cello string. You can slide your finger if you're keying the note at the same time. This is assuming you're keying the note at the same time. You could slide the pitches of the tone down from the top to the bottom for a distance of 2 octaves. A very long bend down or up, or you could play as a violinist does. You would learn how to to where to put your fingers to make a certain pitch and so forth. It can, because it's digital, it can be set up so that the string plays chromatically. In other words, you can put frets on this controller just by the way that you program. It's hard. hard to do this with just words alone.
Sure, I know.
Anyway, it's possible that you can have several modes of operation where you could play the string controller continuously like a violin, or you could play it as if it had frets. And more than likely, any realization of this instrument for the commercial market would have both of those modes, and possibly some others, like a combination of the two, where you get the advantage of being able to have chromatic pitch like a fretted instrument and still be able to affect a little bit of vibrato or something. So that's an option that more than likely would be built into this instrument. So that's the left-hand control, and the right-hand controller is simply basically just a key, like a key on a regular keyboard. And there would be one key for each of the strings. However many strings you put you design into the instrument, whether it's 4 or 6 or whatever, you would assign a key to that channel, to that MIDI channel, and in relation to that particular string controller. Each key would initiate the pitch. In other words, would turn the note on. It can be transposed to any range. In other words, you can quickly and easily tune that particular key to be any MIDI note number, so that you can, it can be in any range, in any key, whatever. You can transpose probably something like 8 octaves or something, over 128 notes or 100.